Love is such a strange, complicated thing. What is it? Is it a connection between two people? Two or more people? Is it a willingness to sacrifice or an unwillingness to let go? Is it something deep and spiritual, or is it just the result of chemicals in the brain encouraging creatures to breed? Technically speaking, it's me. There's a concept in physics in which every fundamental force is represented by a particle, a blip in some cosmic field. Electricity and magnetism are photons. Mass is the Higgs boson. I'm a little bit like that, an entity born from something deeply fundamental to your existence. Something you can feel the effects of, but not truly see. I've been personified in many different ways. A little cherub with wings and a bow, a strapping young man with the same, a many-armed god with a chariot pulled by parrots, or his partner on a golden throne. Just as you made Death Thanatos or a skeleton with a scythe, you've always given me identities too, because I am something intrinsic to you. I am a part of you. But that does not mean I understand you. I might be love, but love is a mystery to me. I feel all that you feel, all of the time. It is an endless, chaotic noise in the background of my existence that I cannot ignore because it is inherent to my very being. If a human being sat in a room with hundreds of different songs playing at full volume at once, could they learn the lyrics to a single one? My existence allows you to feel those things. My existence allows you to love and be loved. Anywhere there is love, I can be in an instant. But I can never ask you about it. I can only feel what you feel and observe. This frustrates me. How can I understand myself if I'm eternally separated from the people who can give me the answers? I can look to a schoolyard and see two children sitting on a bench outside of a classroom. I can feel the way the boy's heart pounds in his chest. I can feel his nervousness, how he worries she might notice his blushing, or the way his eyes linger on her just a little too long. I can feel him agonizing over what to say. I can feel how much he wants to make the girl laugh just so he can see her smile. I can sense that he will never tell her how he feels because, if he does, she might reject him and never talk to him again. He doesn't want that, so he lies to himself and tells himself that he is content so long as they can keep sitting on the bench in each other's company. Is that what love is? That desperate desire just to keep someone's smile in your life? The fear that if that person knew how you feel, they might leave you? Is it that faint, fleeting hope that they will figure out anyway and be overjoyed? Those seem so complicated, but really they are so simple. Those emotions are simultaneously so powerful and pure, but they are also underdeveloped and fleeting. Certainly that boy would call those feelings love, at least in the privacy of his own thoughts. Perhaps, though, that boy's feelings are still too immature to really count. Maybe I should look to people who still have some of that youthful intensity, but tempered with more mature fears. Not far from those children on the bench, I can see two young men. They also sit together, but they have made their feelings known to each other, and only to each other. They understand that their feelings are not complicated, the world around them is. One of them is desperate to let everything he has to keep buried and hidden from all but his beloved escape out into the world. He longs for the freedom and relief that would bring. He knows that the world is changing and growing to understand him better, but he also understands that parts of the world haven't finished growing up yet, and that those parts scare his partner. Just as he so desperately wants to shout from the rooftops how he feels, he understands his partner just as fiercely wants to remain hidden and safe. His partner understands that their love is theirs alone, and they do not have an obligation to share it with their surroundings. I can see how the first young man agonizes over his continued silence, but refuses to speak because doing so would be risking what they have together. So he doesn't shout from the rooftops. He just lets his feelings quietly simmer inside him instead. So is that love? Is it a willingness to put the needs of someone else first? To choose to suffer in silence so that your world doesn't fall apart? I have seen this same story play out many times in my existence. Sometimes they stay silent forever. Sometimes they cannot, and then the other must choose if they value their relationship or their security more. I have seen all three choices made, all with varying degrees of struggle. I cannot help but feel that all of those options are love, and that means I will find no answers with those young men. If I look at those four young people, it is easy to surmise that their youth contributes greatly to my confusion. I should not use them as a baseline to define myself when they are still discovering who they are. Turning my attention elsewhere, half a world away, I can look at a middle-aged couple. They have been married for 20 years. They have 3 children whom they adore and have the utmost pride in. But the years are starting to weigh on them. They care about each other, but they no longer desire each other the same way. That burning passion they had in their uncertain youth has now fizzled to embers, consistently burning but offering little warmth. Each of them secretly wonders if it would be okay to turn to someone else for gratification, to add an element of flux and change to lives that feel so stale. But each is terrified to voice this question. Just like the younger pairs, they don't know what will happen if they open their mouths and speak the truth. They would rather not risk dousing the fire altogether. They value each other and their family too much to take the gamble, even though they both secretly feel the same. The couple next door to them are close in age, but they don't seem to have this problem. They also have children. They also have jobs, but they still seem so full of life. The biggest difference is that they seem to have more in common. They share the same hobbies and they undertake them together. The first couple have tried, but as much as they care for each other, they do not care for the same pastimes. Is love about stability then? Is it about what is shared between two people and what isn't? Is that first couple's love lesser because they do not physically desire each other? Would that passionate spark return if they could find more common ground? Neither of them wishes to leave the other. They just grieve for the intensity they once had. They feel jealous of their neighbors who never seem to have lost it. I don't think I can find my answers here either. For all the things these two couples have in common, they are so different. I'm not sure I can define myself as two opposite sides of a spectrum. In yet another part of the world, there is an elderly pair. They are similar to the couple with the waning passion for each other. They have been together for 50 years. They went through a similar experience once. They even tried seeing other people, but they ended up staying with each other and only each other. Now one of them is laying in a hospital bed, his hand held by his doting wife. His time on the earth is coming to a close. He feels no regret, bar that his wife must suffer the pain of his loss. She smiles at him. She tells jokes. She does everything she can to make sure he knows she will be okay, even though she doubts that to be the case. She is terrified of living her remaining years without him. There is so much consideration shared between them, even if they are basking only in the light of coals. Even if a terrible, painful grief will soon befall one of them, even though the other feels guilty that she will feel it. Is that what a true, matured love is then? Is it the willingness to smile at your partner and tell them everything will be okay, even when inside you feel yourself breaking apart? Is it being willing to shoulder the burden of an inevitable parting, because the decades before make that incredible pain worth it? Is that love more real than the all-encompassing infatuation of the boy on the bench? The young men who struggle to exist together, wanting different things in a world that is still catching up to them? Or the couple who care for each other but fantasize about sleeping with someone else? What of all the other, vastly different snapshots I can see? The two girls who have been friends since they were little more than toddlers, now realizing they want to be something more but don't know how? The two men who love the same woman, who in turn loves both of them equally? The bitter old couple who stay together because they don't know how to be apart, but who still buy each other their favorite treats every Valentine's Day and remember every happy anniversary? The old man who deeply loves his younger wife, who stays with him despite the constant barrage of insults from people who wrongly assume she only wants to inherit his wealth? The truth of the matter is, all of these things must be love, because I can sense it all. I can share in all those feelings and watch those stories play out. I have been doing so ever since such emotions were first felt, since long before anyone tried to give me a face or a name. Yet I still struggle to understand it, because it is all so different. Perhaps I must simply accept that I am confused because I am many-faceted. Perhaps I struggle to understand who and what I am because I am so many different things. I think that I can learn to be okay with that, even as I am compelled to continue to explore myself.
Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only discuss things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, mechanics, etc. is out, unless it relates directly to how the story is being told. My name is Daniel Radford, author, manifestation of a concept, and also your host. And today I'm joined once again by my usual co-host, John Kernan, as we conclude our cycle on romance stories.
Hello, I have been known to gallivant about in a toga and wings. Never a diaper, though.
You heard it here first. This time, of course, we are going to be taking a look into my story that you just heard John reading, The Eyes of Eros. So, let's get into it.
I liked it. It was fun to read.
That's a that's one place to start.
At the end of the day, isn't that the best form of love?
Flattery? I don't know.
No, enjoying things.
Well, I'm glad you liked it because romance not really in my usual wheelhouse as a writer at all. I didn't really think it was my best work either because I've not been well at all for a while now. There was like we had a massive delay recording this, so I don't think it. I was doing my absolute best, but I don't hate it either. I like the concept a lot. I just think I could have probably done it better if I tried again.
Fair enough. It's pretty easy to end up that way, especially when writing something that's like 100% your usual wheelhouse, but it came out good enough.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't, like I said, I don't hate it. I really do like the concept I went with in the end. It just, wasn't peak me. But what are you going to do? Like I said, I was not at my best when writing it, so how could I expect to do my best? Anyway, that's also why, just a sign if my voice sounds a little off, it's not your headset or something, it's my throat. Anyway, there were other reasons why this was kind of difficult beyond just trying not to die and it being not my usual genre by any measure. And that is kind of just that like the we've already had examples of romance that were written extremely well and romance portrayed very poorly. And I feel like we covered a lot of what we would typically want to discuss already in those episodes. So I had this very weird situation where I was like, I don't really want to retread old ground because we've already covered so much of what I have to say about the genre with the previous episodes, and I didn't really think there was anything additional I could really contribute to that discussion and genre with a traditional romance story being told here. So I kind of decided that I wanted to do something a little bit different with this cycles theme. And this is what I came up with, which, funnily enough, I actually got the idea of doing this from The Book Thief, which is a
Hell
story
yeah.
we looked at back in our cycle on narration and narrators.
We love conceptual narrators.
Yeah, I don't know how that idea came to me, just sort of popped into my head and I went, huh, but what if other things other than death?
I bet you some of them have tea from time to time. In fact,
Maybe.
you made a good part of why I think you made a good choice in this case too is I bet you if love as a concept was sentient in the same way as death in the Book Thief, I bet those would be the two out of all of them that interact the most. It is a sad, sad bit of poetry that, when it comes to stories, especially poetry, love and death go hand in hand. One often follows the other.
I mean, it's easy to understand why though those two things both show up so much in our stories because they are both universal. They're two of the very few things that everyone can relate to in one way or another. Obviously, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily experience romantic love, but the concept of love, feeling that in some way for someone, every human has that in some way. It's just one of those few things. It's also much like the fear of death or experiences with grief and things like that, a powerful motivator.
Yeah, that's true. And they are extremely intrinsic to the human experience.
Exactly. And that's kind of one of the other things that I was thinking about when I wrote this is that it's funny because in a way because a lot like death, despite love being so intrinsic to being human, regardless of what brand of it you feel. I mean, even the fact that I just said what brand of it you feel contributes to this idea is that we all have very different experiences and fe with it and feelings about it.
That's true. It's a popular thing to get discussed in a lot of like interview style formats too, because it's one of the things you could genuinely ask and get a different answer about from almost anyone.
Yeah, like that's exactly it. Like both scientifically and narratively and just experientially, it is on paper easy to define, but if you just asked, if you pulled the hat away and just asked the question, what is love, to a room full of people, so many of them would give you a different answer.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that specifically is one of the biggest contributors to why romance as a genre and a subgenre is both so popular but also so derided, like we said before, not because of a bunch of people just straight up disliking romance, but because of people being used to a lot of romance stories and romances in stories not being that good. And I think a lot of it is because it's something where it's really easy to fall into tropes, but also something where having tropes can hurt more than it does in a lot of other genres because tropes aren't inherently bad, but because everybody has such different and unique experiences with love, it's easy to see something that rings of all the other things you've seen and be like, oh, come on, that's not what love is like. That's not what relationships is like. These are all the same.
Exactly that. Like, love is something that is on paper, again, like, it's a very simple concept. It's just a powerful affection between two or more people. Having a great deal of care for someone. On paper, by definition, it's not that complicated. But the actual feeling, what we as people feel, how we experience it, our experiences with it, what it means to us, is so much more complicated than the basic definitions of the word. And yeah, stories tend to really oversimplify it into a handful of generic tropes, and very few of them, very few of those tropes are either grounded in reality or which they don't have to be all the time necessarily, but it's worth noting. And yeah, because they're so generic and they pop up everywhere because they feel like checkboxes that a lot of the writers in this genre just feel the need to tick off. It does start to feel like it has become very bland, and like a lot of stories in the genre kind of are lacking in the depth that could be there because the actual experience and the actual wealth of different experiences people have with the subject matter is so much more expansive than a lot of writers are willing to dip into.
Yeah, I agree. It absolutely is. I think that's one of the things that works about, the actual story you wrote here too, is in some ways, Eros as our narrator is kind of saying the same thing. He's literally looking, I should really be saying they, but they're looking at all these different things, experiencing, feeling, seeing all of them at once, and both in a way having a bigger scope and more ideas for love than just about any person would, but also simultaneously being like, so if all of these things are love, then what is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
I shit you not, I have that written in my notes. What is love, baby, don't hurt me is one of my subheadings.
It's, oh man, that's one of those memes that I'm like, nah, that didn't travel through exposure. That just, at some point, that just went out as a brainwave and infested itself in all of humanity. It's just there now.
Bless you, Hadaway.
But I feel like love is one of the only things where it would ever make sense to have a being that is the deity of, or the representation of it, or just the personification of it, and be like, yeah, it's all these things. I've experienced it. I've felt it through all these people, but I don't quite get it personally. It turns out seeing all these other people's experiences hasn't necessarily made me feel like I really understand it.
That is why I love this concept because it works at a handful of meta narrative levels as well as in universe at a character level. And I enjoy that. I really liked doing that and using the embodiment of the concept to sort of represent my thoughts about the genre as well as the concept itself. Because it is exactly as you said. There are so many different ways to explore the concept of romance and love. But fiction is, in so many ways, is an incomplete picture of it.
Yeah, that's true. Man, its stories in so many ways are all about human experience, but it's the more human an experience it is, the harder it is to actually capture it in full in fiction. Partially
Exactly.
because fiction's not real, and as chaotic as we are as humans, our brain is still tends to be a lot more ordered and organized than reality actually is.
Yeah, and we talked about this a lot, especially in the last episode, but a bit in our episode on the four of them as well, that with especially with young people, with people in general, they read or watch these stories and they come out of it, and that is how they shape their perspective and expectations of what love and romance are. They look at these little simplified snapshots and they go, "Oh, that's what it is." And then they go watch another one and then like, "Huh, but that's not what it is." Or they go, or it reinforces their belief. And then when they experience the reality of it, and it is so much more complicated and varied and messy.
Yeah.
It's hard to deal with.
Yeah. In fact, honestly, if I can get philosophical for a second, I think that very idea is like the reason why Goody Two Shoes children's media, to go slightly off topic, is has such a strong place. But when I think about it, I mean, you are who you are. There's only so much nature versus nurture, and there's a lot of things. And I want to be clear right now. I do not think cartoons or video games or any of that ever make people violent. But that doesn't change that, like, your first exposure to an idea, especially things that you probably will not experience on your own before experiencing them through media, things like love and violence, are easily having their first forms, at least, shaped by these things, specifically by them being your first exposure, which is where I think the value does come from in the goody two shoes and still good moral stuff, which is like one of the reasons I always wish we had more things like Courage the Cowardly Dog, because having grown up when I did, it's really easy for me to look at stuff like Bluey and be like, that's really cute and sweet. I don't personally care that much, but that's cool. But it also makes me really wish we had more things like Courage the Cowardly Dog, because despite having, violence and all the typical 90s cartoon stuff, it had a really strong concept of love specifically, I think, but also like caring and like weirdly enough, despite being so weird and twisted, it had a very strong grasp of morals to pass on to kids with things like one of the very first episodes being, oh my God, Courage the Cowardly Dog has to fight Bigfoot. Except no, he befriends Bigfoot and finds out he's being mistreated as a freak, and they have a nice little dance together and become friends. Like,
Yeah, I think it is good, especially in like media aimed at young people, to explore the range of different ways things can be experienced in a healthy way. And I do appreciate, I think, that a lot of I feel like there was almost like a desert for a while, right? Where we had a lot of stuff in late 90s, early 2000s that did a very good job of dealing with these themes. And then there was like suddenly there was this puritanical culture that sort of popped up, which suddenly it oversimplified everything, or it only was willing to portray things as comedy. It didn't want to touch anything. And then in the last sort of decade, sort of starting around like mid to late 2010s and getting into now the mid 2020s, I think we've gone back to giving more depth, arguably more than ever before, to those stories, and I think that's a good thing. And then, of course, there's Sesame Street, which has been doing a kick-ass job of that forever. But
True.
what a weird play!
Sesame.
What a weird place for this episode to go. Um, but yeah, no, you are right, and I wanted Eros, this concept of love as our narrator, to be representative of that, though. The idea of being the lens of looking at all these little different snippets, these stories, and trying to piece together their understanding of the concept, both itself and how it relates to them through looking at these snippets, these stories, and sort of trying to figure it out like that, because that is how so many of us, all of us really, go about that process ourselves.
Yeah, and like love especially is a thing that like you never know when somebody's going to experience love for the first time. There's a lot of things about like early human life that is structured for the sake of consistency and trying to raise people a certain way. Love is not something that you can structure very much or make consistent amongst individuals or the human populace. It's one of those things that like moral stuff like that is kind of all you have until the day it just hits you for the first time.
And then so much of that shit is out the window immediately.
Seconds, which just makes it that much more confusing for so many people.
Well, especially because you don't. I mean, obviously, most people would have experienced like familial, platonic love from a very young age. But in the context specifically of non-aromantic people who experience romantic love, like the first time you experience that emotion, you have no idea what the fuck it is.
No, and even for a romantic people, like the familial stuff also doesn't actually prepare you that much for your first best friend, like the first, like regardless of what way it is, the first person you're ready to share like almost everything with, or like spend all your time with, or invest yourself in the most. It can be wild.
And your only real frame of reference to figure it out is either advice from other people who may have experienced it themselves already, and by comparison to the media you consume. And neither of those things are necessarily going to be an accurate representation of what the experience is for you.
Yeah, which I haven't experienced it too much myself. I mean, I guess if I was going to call myself something, I would probably call myself Demi. So
Welcome
I'm
to the
not a
club.
hundred percent, I'm not 100% alien to any of the experiences, but like I'm also not really 100% into any of them, which I think no matter what you are is actually a pretty common experience. But that's like that inconsistency really just follows through on everything. Like how can you ever be prepared for love? Trick question. You can't. The only thing you can really try to be prepared for is like to treat other people right and like be good or be better than you were yesterday, and that's not a perfect always cut and clear process either.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I wrote Eros as a narrator the way I wrote them. Because they are kind of just in a perpetual state of going through that experience. They're not just the embodiment of love, they're the embodiment of the experience of it. That I don't understand what this is, and everywhere I look is a different definition of what this is. Ah,
Yeah. It's one of the only things I can think of that now that I'm thinking of the book Thief a little more might have been mildly missing from this is Eros looking over at somebody who's in the middle of a breakup or a breakdown over or because of somebody they love.
Oh yeah,
Like looking over at the
yeah,
moment, because I was thinking of death, and I was thinking of the times when he talks about great atrocities where tons of people died, and death, the concept, isn't happy about it, being like, yeah, that was, I do my job, I did what I do, but can't say I enjoyed picking all those people up and carrying them away for such a stupid reason.
yeah. I wish I had included something like that.
Because I bet that's one of the things Eros would have to deal with too that would be confusing and frustrating, is the ones where looking over and seeing someone who's obviously in pain and obviously suffering and going through it, but still experiencing love just as strongly because they love despite what's going on, or even their love is the reason for what's going on.
Yeah, I if I do rewrite this, which I mean, when am I gonna have the time? Let's be honest, I probably won't. But you were so right. I do wish I'd included something like that because it's a part of it. Loss is a part of love. Like it's you can't experience it without loss.
Yeah, and it love is what makes loss hit so hard.
That yeah, I do wish I'd included that so much. I now that you've said it, I'm sitting here just going, oh, what a missed opportunity. Because yeah, like even if you manage to be one of those rare cases who falls for that one person in friggin' high school and then against all the odds stays with that person like the entirety of the rest of your life. Unless by a absolute freak circumstance you manage to die at the exact same time, loss and grief is impossible to avoid.
Yeah, that's true.
And, the stronger you feel for that person, the more it hurts when they're gone. Whether that's because they left, whether there was betrayal, whether things just didn't work out, whether you messed up, it is a part of it. And, it's definitely the one real thing that's missing from this story, I think, that should be there.
It's okay. Maybe one day one of us will write a story about death and love having tea.
It'd be an interesting conversation. I can see it now. Which one of us do you think causes humans more pain?
Yeah, no, exactly. Or like, yeah, uh, what did what did you do last week? Like, oh, well, I watched all this crazy stuff happening. I went and poked this person on the shoulder and watched what happened differently and how their life went. Like, oh yeah, well, what about you? And like, oh, I was just having a nice time going around people watching, and then I saw this idiot do something bad, slip and fall, hit his head, and took him away. And I was almost done with my day. And then, I don't know, something sad and then I saw a cat or a little girl. And
And then she punted the cat. It was really fucked up.
I was looking at that little girl being like, just you wait. It's going to be your turn one day. That wasn't cool.
I'm gonna savor that one. Uh, it's a trick question, honestly. Though love is the answer. It hurts more because
Yeah.
it's the it's what makes death hurt.
Death is yeah, it's what frames death, and also ultimately, as rough as it is, death is an ending.
Yeah, humans not great at endings. God, we got really philosophical out of nowhere. All right, I suppose not out of nowhere given the subject matter, but damn, this episode's going deep.
Yep. It's a very thoughtful topic.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the sort of the meta narrative side of this. It's just that idea of wanting to represent how I feel about how this is portrayed in fiction through fiction. And I think I did that relatively successfully. But of course, there's the story itself. And I mean, I feel like there's definitely some overlap between the two. But I find the idea of Eros or you know, Venus or whatever the else you want to call them. This but somewhat personified manifestation of this emotion, this almost primordial part of who we are, given sapience. I find them an interesting narrator and an interesting character to explore because, as we said in the like this when we were discussing the meta narrative side of this, what a confusing existence it must be
Yeah.
to, to know you are who you are and you are all of these things and to somehow try and define yourself against all of these different experiences and go, how can I be, how can all of this be me?
Yeah, how can all of this different, crazy, wide, chaotic variety of experiences all be the same thing?
I think there's few characters I've written that I pity more, I think, than Eros because God, it would suck to just be like constantly feeling. It's bad enough as a one individual, like to have one person's worth of these confusing feelings. This poor guy's got everyone who experiences it, when they're experiencing it, how they're experiencing it, all at the same time.
I wonder if sometimes some of the bad things that happen to people from things like that come from the concepts or the beings that manifest from them just having a little tantrum and being like, I'm tired of what you people put me through every day. I'm just gonna do a little zap here, a little chaos there.
You see, I very intentionally made this version of Eros, my version of Eros, passive. They are not able to influence things. They just are the thing. They are the embodiment of love. They are not someone who controls it. They describe themselves in terms of quantum physics in the early parts of the story, just a blip in a cosmic field.
I just had a really, really fun idea for a story that I don't know if I should say on the podcast because people could steal it, but also writing is cool. So, but what if? How interesting would it be to write a story that's about a concept like that dying as somehow, for some reason, people on the whole have mostly stopped feeling or experiencing a thing and a feeling? And like a being like Eros in this story is watching the last couple people on Earth that are keeping them alive slowly, one by one, stop feeling the feeling they come from.
Oh, that's good. I like that a lot. Yeah, you should write that.
That could be
It's very
fun.
it's very Pratchett. Then again, so is personifying concepts like love and death. So
Terry Pratchett's got some good ideas.
I love his version of death. But that's a tangent. We're not talking about death. Maybe one day we will. Um,
Almost certainly.
but yeah, what was I saying? Right, right. I intentionally made errors passive. They are the embodiment of the subject, like not someone who, not a god in control of it, on purpose. Partly because it makes more sense for them to have this confusion, this identity crisis almost, if they have no control over the outcomes. Because if I gave them agency and the ability to manipulate it, everything would be determined by their perceptions. They wouldn't be determined by perception. It wouldn't really work the story in the same way, I feel like. And also because like the emotion who you have these feelings for, you have no say in it.
Nope.
You can't help it. It's, how many of us have had that experience of gone, I feel a thing. Oh no,
Yep.
don't want that. No, nope, nope, no, thank you.
You get to decide when and who you're going to love, even less than you get to decide when and how you're going to die.
Exactly. So I wanted Eros as the embodiment of the concept to embody that element of it as well, the complete lack of choice. So they don't have a say in it, they just are it. And that's a lot to deal with, but so is the emotion that they represent. So it makes sense that it would, they would be a passive onlooker, completely unable to ask anyone that question of how to define themselves.
Makes me giving me another idea, and that it almost makes me makes me want to see a story where we do see some of these manifestations show up and interact with either each other or other characters in some way throughout the story, but specifically whatever the representation of love is just shows up like a shapeshifter as a completely different thing every single time. And when someone's just like, yeah, so what's up with that? They're like, I don't know, this is just how I feel right now. This is just where I'm at. I'm going to be somewhere else in 5 minutes. There's a lot going on.
I mean, a concept like this, they're kind of, everywhere all of the time. Yeah, so that is the character side of Eros, I guess. And that's why I made them the way they are. As far as the structure of the story itself, I guess we're almost going back to a meta-narrative stuff. I should have done this in a different order. Oh well. Uh, because obviously, the way the story is structured, it's Eros turning their gaze to different snippets of people's different love stories. And, I wanted to almost present like a sample tray of what
Hmm.
the genre can be.
Okay.
I wanted the story to be the genre equivalent of when you like walk through Costco and get handed like 40 different free samples.
Oh yeah. Or when you go anywhere with free samples and just every couple of steps you got somebody else trying to throw a different experience at you and it's like I'm just walking. I'm just walking. That's kind of what love is like sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's because of what we talked about earlier, how possibly more than any other genre, because it is so saturated by trope-heavy stories, and not so much now, but historically, a lot of very standard, heteronormative, trope-heavy stories even as well, where the vast majority of this genre, I feel like, is people in their late teens to mid 20s is sort of where most of the focus is, and it's usually a very heteronormative, very typical experience. And I wanted to sort of present some snapshots of, yes, you as a reader, as a consumer of media, probably are most familiar with this one experience, but just like how we as actual people have such varied experiences with this concept and this subject matter. Here's a few of the different things that it could be in fiction.
Yeah, and I think it was portrayed well. It's God, it's so weird, even when it comes to just how we talk about these kinds of experiences and how they fit into narratives. Love is in such a unique position because when I think about it, I don't think I mean, it definitely is at least a little, but like I think the gap in how tropey romance is in stories isn't that much bigger than a lot of other like genres and concepts, but the tropes are so much more consistent. But even if they weren't, I feel like tropes for love hit harder because ironically, despite it being almost the opposite experience for death, which, as we said, is like the other as universal experience, the universality of love and the human experience and just being a person is almost what makes it. It's simultaneously what makes it so easy to fall into tropes for it, but is exactly why it's important. It's more important that it be less tropey than most other things because I think sometimes it doesn't occur to writers that like the very fact that everybody experiences something is what makes it that much more likely that like you can't just lean on shared things that everybody would understand about it because there aren't any. Like there's a lot of stuff that's very common, which is again why I think, like you said, a heteronormative is one of the biggest things because statistically, at least, it's the most commonly seen form of love. So it unfortunately dominates more when it comes to romance and love than most other things do, simply because it's a very hard thing to relate to other people. And the thing the most people will understand, at least on a basic level, is the thing that's the easiest. But that's also exactly why it's so easy to bore and disappoint people because love is something that's the last thing people want to always be the same. It loses so much of its value and spark and interest the second it feels like it's the same.
Yeah, and like to be clear, I'm not, and I'm sure it's the same for you, like I'm not saying that there being a large number of that heteronormative stories is bad, or traditional love stories is bad, or using the common tropes is inherently bad, because that's not, I just want to make a note of the fact that, especially considering how big a role like media plays in our formative understanding of these concepts, that these these snapshots aren't necessarily reflective of reality. And we talked a lot about that in the last episode as well, because it is both a universal and extremely varied experience. And I mean, Eros themselves sort of questions it throughout the entire story. They look at those, the two kids, and they, going probably through their first experiences, and then they look at, the couple that are, they've been together for what, 20 years, they've got kids, things are getting stale, but they don't care about each other any less. They're just bored. And it's like, well, is one of those more real than the other? And then they look at the those guys, and they compare them to the old couple where one of them's on their deathbed, and they're like, is this more real than those earlier experiences? And the answer is no.
It's just different.
It's just different. It's all real. It's all valid. Just as all of the different versions of this in reality are all real and, well, for the most part, are all real and valid. There are some versions of this you should probably seek help for, but we're not going into that.
Yeah. Love is just it simply is. It's a thing in flux. I think it might be, I think love might be the strongest quantum concept of everyday life. I don't think anything we experience normally fits as well with quantum mechanics as love, because does it exist when you're not experiencing it? You can see it in other people, but only when they're experiencing it. It is it's an undeniable thing that you can't say it doesn't exist. You can try not to believe it, but it exists, it's there. And yet, despite being something that will always be there, it's also the thing that is the least clear, the least shaped, the most just, yep, you'll know it when it happens. Heck, you might not even know it right away when it happens, but you can't know it until it happens because it doesn't exist until it happens. There's nothing to perceive. It won't be there until you perceive it.
Yeah, it wasn't an accident that the first one of the first comparisons I made was to quantum fields. That wasn't just a happenstance. It was a very intentional choice, because it is exactly as you said. It is this bizarre force that we can observe and experience, or we cannot, but it's always there. Like, regardless of how you experience it, if you experience it all, it is still such a deep, primal driving force in humanity. And it is simultaneously so hard to really understand.
Yeah, it's in some ways it's not something we ever can fully understand because if somebody somehow managed to move through getting different kinds of love fast enough that they got to the point where they, for the most part at least, understood all of them, in that time they spent understanding the last one they didn't get, 10 new forms of love would pop up and they'd be behind again.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, like, that's why I like this format for this story, because all of those little snapshots that Eros is taking in, those are just snapshots in life stories that are going to be full of, tens, hundreds of those little snapshots. And each one of those snapshots for each one of those characters could be completely different. It's like looking at a collage of screenshots from different media and going and trying to go, okay, I understand all of media now. But
Yeah,
each of those snapshots is representative of a longer, more vast story. Each one of those little snippets I wrote Eros looking in on, that could be a whole story.
and it is. It is somebody's story.
And, that's kind of one of the cool things about this genre, when you think about it, is that despite how heavily dramatized it is, how oversimplified it is, how trope saturated it is, there's a reason so many stories are rooted in the idea of love, of romance, of whatever you want to call it, because it is such a human experience. And it's kind of neat, whether you
It
are a
is.
fan of the genre or not.
It is very neat.
And yeah, I honestly I don't know if I have much more to say on that. Between how philosophical we've gone with it with all this shit this episode and the extremes we covered between the four of them and 50 Shades and Twilight, like I don't know if I have much more to add about this genre right now.
Me neither. There will always be more to say, but there's only so much we can cover at a time. We're just people. If we perceived the total sum of human love all at once, we would break.
Yeah, I don't envy this narrator.
It's one of those things like you could say that arrows could break with love too, and you could also say the only reason they don't is because they can't, because it's not just something they're seeing and experiencing, it's something they are. In a way, they've never been fixed, but as a result, they also can't be broken. Can't be whole, can't be broken. A being in flux, a swirling mass of feeling and experiences.
Yeah, that's just they are the feeling. They are just a part of us. All of the good and all the bad that comes with that. And that's what, by the end of it, that's kind of what they're learning to accept. They are sort of just going, well, I have to acknowledge that I am so confused about who and what I am because I am just that complicated. I am that many faceted. I am the sum of a near universal experience. And I am that whole collage, except instead of snapshots, I'm a entire library of all these different stories in their entirety. I am all these different things, and that is why I'm compelled to keep exploring and trying to understand. But I think I have to be okay with the fact that I am just a mess because the experience that I embody is messy.
Yeah, I don't know if I can ever be anything else.
I'm just gonna have to live with that because I'm immortal.
And that's just a reason that Eros would make a great persona. I am thou, thou art I.
All right, we could leave that there, I think. Thanks for listening in. If you guys enjoyed this episode and have been listening to it on YouTube or over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Podbean or wherever else it shows up, you can also find these episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com, where I also share stories, just like, well, not just like, this one's a bit unique, but much like the one I included today, as well as some that I don't write for the podcast, poetry, that sort of thing. I share blogs and articles there as well, and you can also buy my books both there and through Amazon, which I very much appreciate. And if you want to hear more from John, you can find him streaming on Twitch as Sephir, Sephear, or posting those VODs to YouTube. I definitely recommend checking out his content because it is entertaining and you'll definitely see plenty more of him working with me in the future as well.
Heck yeah.
And that's that. Goodbye.
Bye.